The world's most wanted terrorist died over the weekend. President Donald Trump announced the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi on Sunday. He reportedly detonated a suicide vest during a raid.
Friend of the show, our former colleague Buck Sexton. He knows a thing or two about covert operations. Former CIA analyst told me how much planning that we had gone into finding the ISIS leader. Buck, welcome back to the show.
Hey, man. How you doing?
We're doing great, man. We miss you.
Yeah, I miss seeing all you guys. I'm glad the show is growing so fast and it's going so well.
Well, Buck, so we had big news last night.
Yeah.
You know, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's been killed, your former CIA. Just tells us what goes into something like this.
Well, this in particular was a complicated operation. There was a pretty large contingent. I've seen reporting saying that it was U.S. Army Delta Force.
Right.
And I believe the only person who was injured was actually a canine, canine that one of the handlers had. So the great news is we didn't lose anybody in this process. But this is complicated. I mean, the level of just deconfliction that you would need to go across what was Russian airspace, and that's been receiving a fair amount of attention because we would have had to tell the Russians ahead of time, and also make sure that any other regional players in this part of Syria would know, hey, look, we're coming in with stuff. It has nothing to do with you. We're in and out. This is what's going on. So that just shows, I think, that the level of coordination. Also, it was believed that they knew that he would be there, that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi would be there well in advance of when he actually showed up. So some very excellent intelligence work on this. And he took his own life with a suicide vest, and I've seen reporting 3 of his own kids, possibly 3 people we believe are taking 3 innocents in this process as well that he killed. But all in all, I mean, this is going to be looked at, I think, as a textbook mission. And keep in mind, the site exploitation, the document exploitation that goes on after this as well is going to be really remarkable. When they got bin Laden, there was a lot of stuff that gave a contextual and background understanding of al-Qaeda, but bin Laden wasn't quite as operational, hands-on day-to-day. Obviously, he was stuck in this Abbottabad compound. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was still running the Islamic State, or whatever's left of it. So we're going to know a lot, or rather special operators and the intelligence community know a lot.
That's an important point to make. So the president, I mean, it's a crazy story. Literally, you know, you have these Delta Force guys, says they're flying low. They even took some incoming fire. It was a 2-hour flight to the compound. Then the compound goes, they knew about the tunnels. They knew that, you know, like, they had so much intelligence behind this. I mean, the amount that must have gone into this is just astounding. Like, how do they even get that level of detail? And at the same time, the president says he was watching it all live like a movie in the White House Situation Room.
Well, that's just the reality of the technology that these guys have now, is that they can see effectively. It's just similar to body cams that law enforcement have, but the operators, the actual guys from Delta Force would be moving around, and you could see. I mean, back in the situation, what was going on. It's a tremendous multi-agency, almost certainly. I mean, you'd assume the intel community, CIA, NSA, and other groups would be very much involved in helping to make sure that the intelligence given to these operators was correct. In this case, it obviously was. And in terms of how they get this information, well, then getting into sources and methods, and obviously that's very important for them to keep close hold. But this is a huge win for the Trump administration in a foreign policy sense, and also there's some justice that has been delivered here. When you think about not just the thousands and thousands of people who were murdered by the Islamic State, imprisoned, raped, mutilated by the Islamic State, and also some of the Westerners and specifically some of the Americans who were executed in brutal fashion. This guy had to go, and the fact that our special operators delivered this justice in this way or on this day is something that I feel at least almost all Americans understand is a point for celebration.
I think pretty much everybody's there.
Pretty much.
So here's an interesting thing, Buck. The president says that he is thinking about declassifying the video, the actual video of Baghdadi's last moments. He said he was crying and he's whimpering in a dark tunnel. What do you think about that? There was a big decision not to release the photo of bin Laden's corpse.
This is always a tough call, because, for example, under Geneva Convention, you can't mock detainees. You can't, it's a violation to engage in behavior that, you can't desecrate corpses, and these are all. And there are very important reasons for these boundaries, these guidelines to be in place. In this, but then you think about the famous KSM photo where he looked like he had been out on some kind of an all-nighter, and people realized like this guy is is not some larger than life figure that we should all be living in fear of. I would just say, it's tough without seeing the video to make that call. The president obviously is calling him a loser and all kinds of other pejoratives, which are more than deserved. There's a balance to be struck here. I would think that it is probably. I would think that it's probably unhelpful to release the video over the long term.
So that's the interesting thing, because I'm like, I want to see it, but also
I want to see it too. But also, there's a sense of me that's like we're better than the enemy likes to humiliate, mutilate, torture, and gets a lot of gratification, and really seems to, especially the Islamic State, took a particular sadistic joy in that process. We are the good guys, obviously, and we are better than these people that we are fighting. We are better human beings than these people in the Islamic State that we are fighting. And even though there is a vast separation between us, I think we always want to be on guard to make sure that we don't inch toward the kind of barbarity that we see our enemies. And this would be perhaps a small step in that direction. But maybe not. I mean, it really depends on what's in the video. So I'd have to see it.
So last question, Buck. We've got this whole thing, of course, happens when the president's pulling out of Syria. I mean, do you think it has any impact on what's going on there? And maybe it's indicative that is the mission accomplished? What does it look like?
Well, I do think that this is a moment of, not just a moment of celebration. It feels like a capstone. It feels like perhaps the crowning achievement of the president's anti-ISIS campaign. Which he does not, in the press, get enough credit for. The amplification of the airstrikes, the working with the Kurds, the empowering U.S. military advisors, special forces on the ground to make the decisions necessary to rout the Islamic State quickly, that has gone largely unheralded, I think, in the media for the reasons that we all know, that they don't like Trump. As for what this does for the Syria policy going forward, it shows a few things. One, there is a psychological victory here. When you're talking about a terrorist organization, psychology matters, and the sense that this is now the death of the Islamic State, along with its leader, I think will be a point of, well, they'll have to create some new propaganda to overcome this. Yes, there's also a martyrdom culture when we're talking about jihadists, that they'll clearly try to elevate this guy, and which may be back to your other question about why releasing the video. I can see both sides of that. But the president has shown that he does have the ability to make a tough call here. He is willing to put our troops in harm's way when there is a real objective that needs to be achieved. And the Syria issue, we can still do counterterrorism missions, coordinate with the Turks, coordinate with the Russians, coordinate with the Kurds to get the baddest of the bad guys, and not necessarily be in the process of rebuilding Raqqa ourselves, trying to take territory away officially from the Assad regime and create some kind of statelet or autonomous republic inside of Syria. So I think that it certainly helps the administration going forward and is a big boost of confidence for their policy so far.
Well, Buck, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back, and we appreciate it, man.
Tiger, great to see you, man. Tell everyone I said hi.
I will.